The year was 1875, and the high desert did not care about the affairs of men. It was a vast red plate baking under a white-hot sun. The heat was not a blanket. It was a hammer, pounding the life out of the cracked earth. Red sand shifted in lazy, burning drifts, piling against the bleached white bones of cattle that had long since given up their ghosts. What little wind stirred was hot, carrying the smell of dust and alkali, and perhaps far off, the faint, metallic scent of horses pushed too hard. From the distant blue mist of the mountains, you could sometimes hear the echo of a cavalry bugle, a thin sound of order in a land that answered to none. It was a place of brutal truths and short prayers. Into this truth sat the town of Dustwell. It was little more than a scar on the landscape, a single dusty main street gasping for breath between the saloon and the general store. A small, whitewashed church stood at one end, its cross tilted as if in perpetual question. At the other end was the sheriff's office, a squat building of sun-baked adobe that seemed more outpost than authority. Dustwell lived on a thin trickle of trade and a deep, abiding fear. The trade came from the wagons brave enough to cross the territory. The fear came from the hills, from the shadows, from the word Apache. Nantan Greyhawk watched the town from the crest of a high mesa. His pinto stood motionless, its hide coated in the same red dust that covered his own deerskin legging. He sat straight, his black hair tied back, his face a mask of hard lines cut from the same stone as the cliffs around him. He hated this place. He hated the smell of it, the sour tang of whiskey, cheap perfume, and the unwashed fear of the white man. He hated the sounds that drifted up to him, the sharp, angry clatter of their language, the ringing of the blacksmith's hammer beating metal into shapes of submission. But he was here. He had to be. The drought had been merciless. It had scorched the hunting grounds, turned the creeks to dry, rocky veins. The winter stores were gone. The children of his people were growing thin, their bellies tight with hunger. The horses, the lifeblood of the people, were weak. So he had come, not as a warrior, but as a trader. His saddlebags were heavy with dried jerky and the cured pelts of the last good hunt from many moons ago. He had come to trade for sacks of seed, for barley for the horses. He had come to beg, in his own way, from the very people who had taken everything. His hand went to his back, an unconscious gesture, beneath his shirt, a ridge of scarred skin, slick and old, stretched from his shoulder blade to his hip. The memory was always there, sleeping just behind his eyes. The night the soldiers came. Not just soldiers in their blue coats, but hired men, men with greedy eyes and no flag, their faces lit by the flames of his own burning home. He remembered the screams, the smell of whiskey on their breath. He remembered Luke Harlow's voice, though he did not know the name then, only the sound of the man who gave the orders. He remembered his father's last words, spoken with a chest full of blood. "Live free, Nantan, but do not lose your heart." He nudged the pinto forward. His heart felt like a stone in his chest. Miles away, in a cabin that leaned against the wind, Joanna Hayes ran her hand along the bottom of a wooden grain barrel. She felt only splinters and a fine layer of flour dust. It was almost empty. She stood up, wiping her hands on her faded apron, and looked around the small, dim room. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of light coming from the dirty window. Outside, her small garden was a plot of withered, brown stems. She had tried. She had hauled water until her shoulders ached, but the sun had won. From the corner, a small, dry cough broke the silence. "Mama?" Her heart tightened. She turned to the small cot where her son, Sam, lay. He was 6 years old, small for his age, with her late husband's fair hair and eyes that were too large for his thin face. His cough was getting worse. "I am here, Sam," she said, her voice softer than she felt. She walked over and brushed the damp hair from his forehead. His skin was warm, too warm. She looked back toward the window, toward the faint smudge on the horizon that was Dustwell. Her gaze was a mixture of raw fear and hardened determination. She had to go. She had no choice. She needed flour to make bread. She needed beans. And she needed medicine for Sam's cough. And she had no money. She would have to ask for credit, to beg, from the same people who whispered about her behind her back. Her mind turned, as it always did, to Elias, her husband. The town believed Elias Hayes had died a hero, killed in a brave stand during an Apache skirmish that had set his wagon on fire. The town had built a story around him. But Joanna knew stories could be lies. She had been there, hidden in the rocks, told to stay put. She had not seen the Apache. She had only seen the flash, heard the sudden deafening explosion that was not like gunfire. And just before that, she had heard voices, her husband's, and another, Luke Harlow. They had been arguing, their voices sharp and angry. Something about land and water rights and a debt. Elias had shouted. Harlow had shouted back. Then there was only fire. The town called her a widow. Some, in quieter, meaner tones, called her the Apache widow. A strange, cruel name that hinted she was somehow tainted, somehow responsible, perhaps even friendly with the natives. They did not know she was a different kind of widow. A widow of a man who had been arguing with the most powerful man in the territory right before he was blown to pieces. They did not know her fear of Luke Harlow was deeper and more personal than her fear of any Apache. She put on her bonnet, her hands moving with a stiff, practiced resolve. She would not let Sam starve. She would not let him die. She would face the whispers, and she would face the storekeeper's pitying stare. Nantan Greyhawk pressed his heels into the Pinto's flanks, and the horse began the slow, careful descent from the mesa, kicking up clouds of the fine red dust that gave the town its name. At the same time, Joanna Hayes finished hitching her old mule to the rickety wagon, the wheels groaning in protest. She lifted Sam, wrapped in a thin blanket, and placed him on the seat beside her. Two people, from two worlds that had only ever met in violence, were moving toward the same dusty street. One came for grain to save his people. The other came for flour to save her son. And neither knew that the desert, which had already taken so much, was about to demand even more. Nantan rode into Dustwell when the sun was a gold coin burning a hole in the sky. It was high noon, a time when only fools and the desperate were moving. The town seemed to hold its breath. The ring of the blacksmith's hammer stopped. A chair scraped on the saloon's porch, then went still. Every eye, from the windows of the hotel, from the shadows of the livery stable, turned to him. He felt the weight of their hate. It was as physical as the heat, a heavy blanket of distrust. Men who had been leaning against posts slowly straightened up. Their hands, as if pulled by a single string, moved to rest on the holsters at their hips. All this, just for the color of his skin, for the black hair that hung unbound to his shoulders. He stopped his Pinto in front of the sheriff's office. The horse stamped once, shaking off the dust, and the sound was like a gunshot in the heavy silence. The door of the office opened, and Sheriff Cole Maddox stepped out. He was a man who looked like he had been worn down by the sun, his face a map of creases, his eyes the color of washed-out sky. He was not a big man, but the badge on his vest seemed to give him weight. His hand was not on his gun, but near it, resting on the worn leather of his belt. "That's far enough," Cole said. His voice was flat, dry as the street. "State your business." "I come to trade," Nantan said. His voice was low, and he spoke the white man's English carefully, stripping it of any accent. The sheriff's eyebrows raised a fraction. "To trade? Huh. We do not trade with your kind often. Not friendly trade. Anyway." He nodded toward the general store. "You want to go to Harper's place? Leave your weapons with me. All of them." Nantan sat still for a long moment. He could feel the eyes of the town on his back. To give up his weapons was to make himself naked, vulnerable, but he needed the grain. He thought of the hungry faces in his village, He unstrapped the rifle from his saddle and handed it down. But first, he then unbuckled his gun belt and passed the pistol in holster.
"That's all of it,"
Nantan said. Sheriff Cole's eyes narrowed. They flicked to the long, sheathed knife at Nantan's hip, the handle carved from deer antler. "And that—" "It is my knife," Nantan said. "It does not leave my side." "It's a weapon." "It is Apache," Nantan replied, his voice unchanged. "I am Apache. You take one, you take the other." A tense second passed. Cole measured the man on the horse. He saw the unblinking gaze, the sheer lack of fear. He also saw the street filled with curious, hostile faces. A shootout over a knife was not how he wanted to spend his afternoon. "Fine," Cole spat. "But you make one wrong move. One, and my men will put you down before that knife even clears the leather. You understand me?" Nantan said nothing. He simply swung his leg over the pinto, landing softly on the street. He tied the reins to the hitching post, giving the horse a quiet word in his own tongue. Then, straight-backed, he walked past the sheriff and pushed open the doors to the general store. The inside of the store smelled of coffee beans, cured tobacco, and the sharp tang of vinegar from a pickle barrel. It was dim, a relief from the blinding sun. For a moment, the figures inside were just shadows. Then his eyes adjusted. In the center of the store, a big man in a fine black coat was leaning over a smaller, rounder man in overalls. The big man was Luke Harlow. Nantan knew him on sight. His voice was a low, confident rumble. "It's simple, Abner," Harlow was saying. "Your land is not worth much. The creek's almost dry. You sell it to me now, for a fair price, or you'll be begging me to take it for 10 cents on the dollar come winter."
"But Mr. Harlow," the farmer whined, "I just need a little more time."
"Time is something this land does not give," Harlow said, placing a heavy, ringed hand on the man's shoulder. At a counter near the back, 2 women in bonnets were talking in low, sharp whispers. Their eyes were on the door. "Did you see her wagon?" one of them whispered. "The wheel's about to fall off. And the boy, sick again." "Serves her right," the other said, her voice full of sour satisfaction. "Living out there alone, it is not natural. Elias was barely in the ground before she started acting strange. I heard she lets them come right up to the house." "Who?" "The savages. Of course. My husband says, well, he says he would not be surprised if she was trading more than just old blankets. The Apache widow, he calls her." The bell on the store door tinkled again. The whispers stopped. The negotiation between Harlow and the farmer paused. Every head in the store turned. Joanna Hayes walked in. Her dress was, as the woman had said, patched, but Nantan saw that the patches were sewn with small, neat stitches. Her clothes were faded from lye soap and sun, but they were clean. Her face was thin, the skin pulled tight over high cheekbones, and there were dark shadows under her eyes. But she did not look down. She held her head high, her back as straight as a rifle barrel, and walked directly to the counter where the store's owner, Mr. Harper, was polishing glasses. "Mr. Harper," she said, her voice quiet but clear. Harper put down his rag, his face closing up. "Mrs. Hayes." "I need a few things," she said, her gaze steady. "A bag of flour, some beans, and do you have any of Dr. Allen's cough syrup, my Sam? He has a bad cough." Harper sighed, a long, mournful sound. He did not move. "Joanna, we have talked about this. The bill Elias left—" "I know," she said, and for the first time, her voice wavered. A flush rose on her pale skin. "I will pay for it. I will. I just need a little more time. The garden failed, but I can pay you come spring. I promise." "Everyone promises, Joanna," Harper said, shaking his head. "Perhaps the lady has other ways to pay," a voice drawled. Luke Harlow had turned away from the farmer. He was smiling, a wide, unpleasant smile that showed his tobacco-stained teeth. He walked over to Joanna, his polished boots loud on the wooden floor. He looked her up and down, his gaze lingering on her body. "A few bags of flour," he mused. "That cough syrup seems like a steep price for Harper, but perhaps not for me. Maybe you could trade a few warm nights in your bed for that flour."
Widow.
The men in the store snickered. The two women looked away, a faint, pleased blush on their faces. Joanna turned white, then a deep, burning red. She recoiled as if struck.
You are a pig, Mr. Harlow,
she whispered.
"And you are a broke, lonely widow,"
he said, his smile vanishing.
Do not be proud of me.
Nantan had been watching. He had been standing by the door, a silent, dark-skinned shadow. The people in the store had already forgotten he was there, dismissing him as just another savage. But he was not looking at Harlow. He was looking at Joanna. His mind had gone very still, very clear. He was seeing her, but he was also seeing a different night, many years ago. A night of fire and screaming, not unlike the one that had destroyed his own home. It had been a small, failed raid, a desperate attempt by his people to get horses, and the soldiers had ambushed them. He had been a young man then, not yet Nantan, just a boy trying to drag his wounded cousin, Little Raven, into the rocks. A white woman had found them, a girl. Really, she had been with the wagon train they had attacked, and instead of screaming for soldiers, she had looked at the blood gushing from Little Raven's leg, and then at him. Her eyes had been wide with fear, but she had done the impossible. She had torn a strip from her own petticoat. She had knelt in the mud and the blood, and, with trembling hands, she had bound the wound, pulling the cloth tight. He remembered the soldiers shouting for her. He remembered her hands being raw and scraped, and he remembered seeing a dark, angry red line on her wrist, a rope burn, from where she had been tied to the wagon. Now, he looked at the woman standing before Luke Harlow, and as she raised her hand to push a stray strand of hair from her face, he saw it, on the inside of her right wrist, a pale old scar, the exact shape of a rope burn. She did not remember him. He had been a boy painted for war, hidden in shadow, but he remembered her. He remembered the eyes that had chosen mercy over hate. Luke Harlow was not smiling anymore. His pride was stung. He reached out and grabbed Joanna's arm. "Where do you think you are going?" he snarled, pulling her toward him. Joanna cried out, stumbling, dropping the small, empty coin purse she held. "Let her go." The voice was low, deep, and utterly calm. It cut through the store like a cold wind. Every person froze. Luke Harlow stopped, his hand still on Joanna's arm. He turned his face a mask of disbelief. Nantan Greyhawk had moved. He was no longer by the door. He was standing in the middle of the room, his weight balanced on the balls of his feet. "What did you say?" Harlow asked, as if he could not believe his ears. "I said," Nantan repeated. His eyes locked on Harlow's. "Let her go." The shock in the room was absolute. This Apache, he spoke English. Not the broken, grunting English of a reservation Indian, but the clear, measured English of a white man, of a scout. Harlow laughed, a short, ugly bark. "Are you telling me what to do? A redskin, a murdering savage?" Nantan did not move. He did not look at the gun on Harlow's hip. He just looked at his face. "You talk of murder," Nantan said, his voice still quiet. "I remember a night of murder. I remember men in soldier coats, and men in no coats at all. I remember a man with a loud voice, like yours. He carried a rifle the soldiers use, a Sharps, not a hunting rifle. It was strange to see a white man who was not a soldier carrying a soldier's gun in a massacre of women and children. A seed of doubt, of confusion. He was not just defending her. He was accusing. Luke Harlow's face went from red to a pale, mottled white. The name, the connection, the memory, it struck a nerve. You lying filth, Harlow hissed, his hand dropping from Joanna's arm. His hand went to the butt of his pistol. I will kill you where you stand. Luke, do not, Sheriff Cole, who had been watching from the doorway, suddenly shouted, his own gun drawn and pointing, but at whom it was not clear. Stand down. Apache, stand down. But Harlow was already pulling his weapon. Time slowed. The snicker of the men, the smell of the coffee, the dust in the air. And then Joanna Hayes moved. She did not scream. She did not run. She, who had been the prize, the victim, the object of scorn, did the one thing no one expected. She was terrified. She was shaking so hard her knees threatened to buckle. But as Luke Harlow's pistol began to clear the holster, she lunged forward. She did not lunge at Harlow. She lunged sideways, planting herself directly between the black gaping hole of the gun barrel and the chest of the Apache warrior. She stood there, arms half raised, her eyes wide with a terror so pure it was almost its own courage. She was protecting him. The store, the town, the entire desert, held its breath. The Apache, the widow, and the gunman were locked in a triangle of hate, honor, and fear. And the first shot had not even been fired. The silence in the store stretched until it was a thin, screaming wire. Joanna Hayes stood shaking, her back to Nantan, her face to Luke Harlow's pistol. The barrel of the gun was a black, empty eye, and it was pointed right at her heart. Harlow's face was a terrible sight, pale with rage, his finger white on the trigger. Sheriff Cole Maddox had his own gun out, but it was wavering, pointing somewhere in the dirt between Harlow and Nantan. Damn it, Luke! I said stand down! Get out of the way, widow! Harlow spat at Joanna. This is not your fight. Please, Joanna whispered, her voice a dry rasp. Please do not here. A man's got a right to defend himself from a lying savage. What, by shooting a woman in the back first? A new voice cut in. The voice was rough, like gravel rattling in a dry bucket. It came from the street. The saloon doors swung open, and old Ben Carter stepped out. He was the saloon owner, a man whose face was a roadmap of broken veins, his eyes cynical but sharp. He held a sawed-off shotgun, and it was resting very calmly in the crook of his arm, pointed at no one in particular, which made it pointed at everyone. Luke, Ben Carter said, walking slowly into the street. You are making a mess on Harper's porch. Sheriff, you are about to let this get real stupid, real fast. Harlow's eyes flicked to old Ben, then back to Nantan. He was trapped. He could not shoot the widow to get to the Apache. It was bad for business, and even in Dustwell, there were lines. He slowly, very slowly, lowered the pistol, though he did not holster it. She stuck up for him, Harlow growled, as if that explained everything. I see that, Ben Carter said, stopping a few feet away. He looked at Nantan, then at Joanna, then at the packages on the floor by her feet. Seems to me we just have a simple trade negotiation gone sideways. He turned to Harper, who was hiding behind his counter. Harper, what did the lady want? Harper peeked up. Flour, beans, that cough syrup for her boy. And the Apache? Ben asked. He came to trade, Sheriff Cole answered, finally holstering his own gun, his relief visible in the sweat on his forehead. For grain. Well then, old Ben said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. Here's what we are going to do. The Apache has got pelts. Mrs. Hayes needs flour. It seems to me the Apache can just add her goods to his trade, pay for them, meat for grain, and a little extra for the lady's troubles. No money, no credit, just a trade, a clean trade. Luke Harlow scoffed. And why would he do that? What is she to him? He looked at Joanna, his eyes full of fresh, ugly meaning. Unless the whispers are true, a savage knows how to pity a white woman. Does he, or is it something more? He will do it, Nantan said. His voice was still calm. I will trade for her things. He turned to Mr. Harper, ignoring Harlow completely. My pelts, for my grain and for her flour, her beans and her medicine. Joanna turned, her face stricken. She looked at Nantan, her eyes wide with a new, different kind of panic. To be shamed by Harlow was one thing. To be indebted to this man, this stranger, this Apache was another. It would confirm every vicious rumor.
No,
she said, her voice shaking.
I cannot.
Nantan's gaze was steady. He did not look at her with pity, or with lust, or with anything she could name. He just looked at her. Your son is sick, he stated. It was not a question. That broke her. The thought of Sam, back in the wagon, his cough getting drier, hotter, her pride, her reputation, it all crumbled to dust. She looked down at the floorboards, at the spilled coin purse, and gave a single, almost invisible nod. Harlow watched, his lip curled in a sneer. He had lost the confrontation, but he was turning this into a different kind of victory. He holstered his pistol with a loud snap. Well, isn't that touching? The whole town sees it. The Apache's widow, taking charity from a savage. You have made your bed. Joanna, now you get to lie in it. He turned and stalked out of the store, shoving the farmer, Abner, out of his way. The tension in the store did not break. It just changed, becoming thick and suffocating with gossip. The two women in bonnets hurried out, their faces full of scandal they were dying to share. Mr. Harper, eager to have this over, quickly bagged the flour, the beans, the salt, and the small brown bottle of cough syrup. Nantan untied a heavy bundle of cured pelts from his saddle and brought them in. He did not haggle. He simply laid them on the counter. Harper weighed the grain Nantan needed, added Joanna's supplies, and pushed the sacks toward him. It's about even, the shopkeeper muttered, refusing to meet Nantan's eyes. Nantan picked up the sacks of grain for his people. He then looked at Joanna's smaller bags. She moved to take them, her face still aflame with shame, but he picked them up first. He carried them all, his own and hers, out of the store, walking past Sheriff Cole and old Ben Carter without a word. He walked to her wagon. The old mule looked at him with sad, tired eyes. In the back, on a bed of old blankets, a small boy was curled up, coughing in his sleep. Nantan placed Joanna's supplies gently in the wagon bed. He heard her footsteps behind him. She had stopped watching him. The boy, Sam, woke up from the cough. His eyes opened. He saw the tall, dark-skinned man standing beside the wagon. His eyes went wide with a mix of fear and pure, childish curiosity. Nantan looked at the boy. He saw the thinness of his face, the fever flush on his cheeks. He reached into a small pouch on his belt. He pulled out a small, smooth piece of carved wood. It was shaped like a bird, a hawk, its wings spread. It was tied to a simple leather thong. He held it out to the boy. For nightmares, Nantan said, his voice softer than it had been in the store. Sam looked at his mother, then back at Nantan. Slowly, his small, chapped hand reached out and took the carving. He curled his fingers around it, his expression unreadable. Joanna rushed forward, her breath catching. Sam, she moved to the wagon, pulling her son close, her body a shield between him and Nantan. She looked at Nantan, her eyes a storm of confusion and fear. Thank you, she said, the words sounding stiff, suffocated. If I do not, I cannot pay you for this. It is not a gift, Nantan said. Then what? She asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. What do you want? I do not want the town saying I am taking things from a savage, he finished for her. His face did not change. I am paying a debt, a memory from a long time ago, a night of rain and fire, a girl who was not afraid of Apache blood. Joanna stared at him, her brow furrowed. What are you talking about? I do not know you. He looked at her, at the scar on her wrist, pale against her skin. No, he said, You do not. He turned to go, his own sacks of grain waiting. Hold it! Apache! Sheriff Cole Maddox stepped in front of him. Old Ben was behind him, the shotgun now pointed at the ground. You have finished your trade, Cole said, his voice official and hard. I am giving you one night. You can camp by the creek, outside of town limits. You finish whatever business you have, and you are gone by sunrise. I see your face in this town tomorrow. I will have you arrested, or shot. Am I clear? Nantan nodded once. And one more thing, Cole said, his eyes flicking to Joanna's wagon, which was already rolling away. Joanna slapping the reins, desperate to escape. You stay away from her. You do not go near her farm. You do not talk to her. You are causing enough trouble for her as it is. You hear me. Nantan's gaze was cold. She was not the one in trouble. She was the one standing in front of the gun. Cole's face darkened. Do not get smart with me. Just get your grain and go. One night. Nantan slung the heavy sacks over his pinto, the horse grunting at the weight. He mounted in one smooth motion and, without looking back, rode toward the creek. As he left, Cole felt a heavy hand on his shoulder. Luke Harlow was back, his face smiling, but his eyes were not. Good work, Sheriff, Harlow said, his voice low and friendly. Keeping the peace, but just so you know that Apache causes one more bit of trouble tonight. One single thing I am not going to blame him for. He smiled wider. I am going to blame you. I am going to tell everyone our good sheriff is the one who let the fox into the henhouse, and then let him go. Cole Maddox watched Harlow walk away, his gut churning. He was a man standing in a closing trap. That night, 2 fires burned. One was small, controlled, set in a ring of stones by the creek bed just outside Dustwell. Nantan Greyhawk sat before it. He was not eating. He was watching the flames, his mind far away. He saw a young girl's hands, trembling but firm, tying a knot around his cousin's leg. He saw the rope burn on her wrist. His father's words came back to him, as they always did. A debt of honor must be paid. My son, it is a heavier stone than any hate. He had paid for it, but he knew, with a cold certainty, that the payment had not been simple. He had not freed her. He had only tied her closer to him, and to a danger she did not understand. The other fire was in a small iron stove, in a cabin that leaned against the wind. Joanna Hayes sat at her rough wooden table, watching her son sleep. Sam's breathing was easier, the cough syrup seeming to work. The fever had not broken, but it was no worse. In his hand, held tight even in sleep, was a small, carved wooden bird. Joanna stared at it. She thought of the man's eyes. They were not the wild, crazed eyes of the savages in the stories. They were not the greedy, cruel eyes of Luke Harlow. They were still, like a deep pool of water. He had spoken of a debt, of a memory. He had looked at her as if he knew her. She felt a tremor of fear that had nothing to do with rumors, and everything to do with the fact that, for a moment in that store, when she had stood between him and the gun, she had not been afraid of him. She had been afraid for him. She touched the scar on her wrist, a mindless habit, and wondered what he had meant. The night grew deeper. The moon was a sliver, offering little light. In the shadows near Joanna's farm, 3 men on horseback dismounted. They moved quietly, their boots wrapped in burlap to muffle the sound. They carried torches, but they were unlit. One man, working with quick, brutal efficiency, broke the simple latch on her small storehouse. He kicked over the nearly empty barrel of flour, scattered the last of her dried beans, and smashed the few jars of preserves she had on the shelf. The other 2 men moved to the small, rickety corral. They cut the rope gate. "Go on, get!" one of them hissed, slapping the flank of her old mule. The 2 scrawny cows she owned were harder to move, but a few sharp jabs with a knife point sent them bawling and crashing into the brush. The leader of the group, A man with a scarred face who worked for Luke Harlow grunted in satisfaction. He dismounted, and from his saddlebag, he took a pair of soft Apache-style moccasins. He walked back and forth in the dirt near the broken storehouse, pressing the soles hard into the ground. He did the same near the broken corral gate. The tracks were clear in the moonlight. "That's enough," he whispered. "Let's go." The next morning, the sun rose over a scene of quiet devastation. When the first farmer rode by on his way to town, he saw the empty corral, he saw the scattered food, and he saw the tracks. By the time Joanna Hayes woke, her neighbors were already gathering. They stood in a grim, silent circle, looking at the damage. "It's them," one man said, his voice low and angry. "It's Apache tracks, clear as day." Another man nodded, his hand on the gun at his hip. "It was him, that savage in town yesterday. He paid for her food, and then he came back to take the rest," and drove off her stock. The anger was rising, hot and fast, like a brush fire. "He was with her. It was a trick. She is one of them." They all turned as one, their faces hard, and looked toward Dustwell. They knew exactly who to blame. The sun was just beginning to burn the chill from the air when Nantan rode back into Dustwell. He had slept little, his mind troubled by the woman's eyes and the sheriff's warning. He needed to collect the grain he had traded for, and then he would be gone, away from this nest of vipers. But the town was not as he had left it. There was a crowd. It was not the curious, fearful crowd of yesterday. This was a mob. They were gathered in front of the sheriff's office, perhaps a dozen men, their faces ugly with mourning anger. Luke Harlow was in the center, talking, his hands chopping the air. Sheriff Cole Maddox stood on the steps of his office, his arms crossed, his face a mask of uneasy authority. When they saw Nantan, the talking stopped. A man spat a brown stream of tobacco juice into the dust. Harlow smiled. It was a terrible, satisfied smile. "Well, look who's here. The murdering dog came back to the scene of the crime." Nantan pulled his pinto to a stop. He kept his hands in plain sight, resting on the horse's neck. "I came for the grain I traded for." "Grain!" a farmer shouted, his voice cracking with rage. "You came for grain after what you did to the widow." "He came to finish the job," another yelled. Nantan's gaze was steady. He looked at Harlow. "I do not know what you speak of." "You do not know?" Harlow's voice dripped with mock surprise. "Why, you poor, ignorant savage. You must have forgotten you went out to the Hayes farm last night. You tore down her storehouse. You scattered her food. You drove off her stock. We saw the tracks, Apache moccasins, plain as day." A roar of agreement came from the crowd. "We saw them! Thieving murderer!" Harlow stepped forward, pointing a thick finger at Nantan. "You see, Apache, we know your kind. You give with one hand, and you take with the other. You helped the poor widow in the store so everyone would see. Then you went out in the dark, like a snake, and took everything she had left, just like your people always do." He turned to the crowd, his voice rising to a preacher's fervor. "How long, men, how long do we let them do this? He threatened me yesterday. He corrupted the widow. He attacked her property. He is not just a thief, he is a message, and I say we will send a message back." "What do you want to do? Luke!" a man yelled. "I say we do what the sheriff is too weak to do. I say we string him up right here, a warning to every savage who thinks he can ride into Dustwell." The crowd surged forward, a low growl rising from their chests. "Yes, hang him! Get the rope!" Sheriff Cole finally moved, pulling his pistol and pointing it at the sky. "That is enough. Back off, all of you. I am the law here." "You are the law," Harlow sneered. "You are the man who let him keep his knife. You are the man who let him stay the night. This is your fault. Cole, stop." The voice was high, thin, but it cut through the anger like a clean blade. The crowd turned. Joanna Hayes was standing there, her wagon just behind her. She must have just arrived. having seen the mob from her own farm. She was clutching Sam's hand so tightly her knuckles were white. She was pale, her eyes huge in her thin face, but she was looking right at Luke Harlow. Harlow's smile widened. He spread his arms, a picture of welcome. "Ah, the victim come, Mrs. Hayes. Come and see the justice of Dustwell. Tell the men what this animal did to your property. Demand his neck." Joanna took a deep breath. Sam hid behind her skirt. "No," she said. The crowd went silent. Harlow's smile froze. "What did you say, woman?" "I said no," Joanna repeated, her voice shaking but gaining strength. "You cannot hang him." Harlow laughed, but it was a strained, ugly sound. "Have you gone mad? He is the one who did it. We all saw the tracks." "I saw the tracks, too," Joanna said, her gaze sweeping the hostile faces. "I saw moccasin prints. I did not see him make them. I did not see his face. Are you all so eager for blood that you will hang a man for a footprint? What kind of justice is that? That is not law. That is a lynching." The silence that followed was absolute. A heavy, stunned vacuum. This was not what anyone expected. They thought she would be the one handing them the rope. A man in the crowd finally spoke, his voice thick with suspicion. "She is defending him." "I knew it," another woman hissed from a doorway. "The Apache's widow. She is in on it with him." Harlow's face turned purple. She had outmaneuvered him. She had taken his righteous anger and turned it into a mob. Now she was making them look like one. Nantan had not moved. He watched her. He saw the terror in her. But he also saw the iron. She was standing against the whole town. For him, a man she did not know. A savage. The debt, he thought, was growing more complicated by the second. Sheriff Cole Maddox, seeing his chance, stepped forward, his authority returning. "The woman is right. I cannot hang a man on a footprint, but I am not letting him go." He looked at the crowd, then at Harlow. "I am placing him in custody, on suspicion of property destruction and theft. I will lock him in the livery stable. I will ride out to the Hayes place myself and investigate. If I find what I need, he will get a trial. If he tries to escape," he let the threat hang. Harlow was furious, but he had to play the part of a law-abiding citizen. "Fine, Sheriff, lock him up. But if he gets out, it is on your head." "He will not get out," Cole said. He nodded to two of his deputies. "Tie his hands. Take his knife." Nantan offered no resistance. He dismounted, stood tall as they bound his wrists tightly. He handed his antler-handled knife to the sheriff. He felt the hatred of the crowd like a physical force as they shoved him toward the dark, hot stable behind the jail. The heavy door slammed shut, and a thick wooden bar dropped into place. The afternoon sun beat on the stable roof, turning the small space into an oven. It smelled of old hay, manure, and the sharp scent of his own sweat. He sat in the shadows, his hands tied, and he waited. Hours passed. The sounds of the town faded into the late afternoon quiet. He heard a horse, then the creak of the bar being lifted. Just slightly. The door opened a crack. It was Joanna. She looked terrified, clutching a small tin cup of water. She slipped inside, pushing the door almost closed behind her. "I do not have long," she whispered, her voice trembling. She knelt in front of him, holding out the water. He was tied. He just looked at her. She understood. And with shaking hands, she lifted the cup to his lips. He drank. The water was warm, but it was the best thing he had ever tasted. She set the cup down. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Why did you do it in the store? You knew it would cause this." "I told you," he said. "A debt." "A debt for what? For me standing in front of you? That was madness. I do not even know why I did it." "Not that debt," Nantan said, his voice low. "The first one, the one from many years ago." "I do not know what you mean," she said, but her eyes were uncertain. "We were by the Red River. A raid went bad. My cousin, Little Raven was just a boy. He was shot in the leg. I dragged him into the rocks. We were hiding. You found us." Joanna's breath hitched. Her face went pale.
No.
"You were with a wagon. Your husband was shouting for you. You had a rope burn on your wrist from being tied. I think you looked at my cousin, and he was bleeding. He was dying. You tore a strip from your own white dress, and you tied his leg. You stopped the bleeding. Then the soldiers came, and we fled." The memories hit her like a physical blow. The shouting, the rain. Elias had been furious, had tied her to the wagon to keep her safe after she had wandered. And then the raid, and the boy, the dark-eyed Apache boy bleeding in the mud. She had helped him.
I remember,
She whispered, her hand going to her throat.
he was so small.
"He lives," Nantan said. "He is a warrior now. You saved his life. I owe you for that." She stared at him, the tin cup forgotten in her hand. The whole world was tilting. Her late husband, Elias, had been a hard man. He had preached hate for the Apache. "The only good Injun is a dead one," he would say. He had struck her hard that night for wasting good cloth on a red-skinned pup. But a different memory, one she had buried, now fought its way to the surface. Years before that, when they were first married, Elias had been struck down with a terrible fever, a shivering, burning sickness. An old Apache scout, one of the few tame ones, had passed their camp. She, in her desperation, had offered him tobacco. He had looked at Elias, grunted, and given her a small pouch of bitter bark. "Boil," she was told. The fever had broken. The bark had saved her husband's life. Elias had forbidden her to ever speak of it. Now, the conflict tore at her. Her husband, who taught her to hate them, had been saved by one. She, who had been taught to fear them, had saved one. And now, this man, this Nantan, was here, tied up, paying a debt of honor, while the town, her town, was ready to murder him for a crime she knew, deep down, he did not commit. She started, but she did not know what to say. Before she could say more, they heard it. Laughter, drunk, loud laughter from the street.
"He is in there, I tell you,"
a slurred voice said. Harlow said to check on him, make sure he's secure. Joanna scrambled to her feet, her eyes wide with terror.
"They are coming."
The heavy bar on the outside of the door was lifted. The door swung open hard, slamming against the stable wall. 3 men stumbled in, silhouetted against the bright evening light. They were regulars from Old Ben's saloon, men who did odd, dirty jobs for Luke Harlow. They were very drunk, and they were armed. One had a club, another a hay pitchfork, and the third, a man with a scarred face, had a pistol. Well, the scar-faced man slurred, his eyes landing on Nantan, then moving to Joanna. A slow, rotten smile spread across his face. "What's this, the Apache's widow? Visiting her lover Harlow was right. You are a pair."
"Get out,"
Joanna whispered, her voice shaking.
"Get out."
"We are just checking on the prisoner," the man with the club said, stepping toward Nantan. "Making sure he does not escape." He raised the club. The man with the pistol laughed.
"Yeah, in fact, I think I see him trying to escape right now." He raised his pistol, aiming it at Nantan's chest. "Looks like we gotta shoot him." It happened fast. Nantan was a warrior. His hands were tied, but his feet were not. As the man with the club swung, Nantan rolled, his bound hands coming up to catch the man's wrist, using the man's own momentum to pull him off balance. The man crashed into the pitchfork wielder. The scar-faced man aimed his pistol.
"Hold still, you bastard."
He lunged for Joanna, grabbing her arm. "We will just take the woman, too." Nantan exploded. He did not seem to be a man, but an animal. He launched himself from the ground, his bound wrists coming up, catching the scar-faced man under the chin, snapping his head back. The man stumbled, his pistol firing, the bullet exploding into the hayloft. Joanna screamed. It was not a whisper or a plea. It was a full-throated, terrifying shriek of pure, mortal terror that ripped through the quiet evening air of Dustwell. The man with the club recovered, raised it to strike Nantan in the back. The stable door burst open again. "Drop it!" Sheriff Cole Maddox stood there, his shotgun leveled. He had not gone to the farm. He had been in the saloon, drinking, dreading the ride. Behind him, half the town, including old Ben and a smirking Luke Harlow, were running up. They saw a scene of chaos, Joanna cowering in the corner, 2 men groaning on the ground, and the Apache, his hands still bound, standing over the scar-faced man who was clutching his pistol.
He tried to escape,
The scar-faced man sputtered, clutching his throat. "We came to check, and he was trying to escape. He attacked us, and he had the widow in here with him." Luke Harlow stepped forward, his face a mask of righteous shock. "My God! Sheriff, look at this! He is a wild animal. He almost killed these men, and he had her in here. They were planning it. I told you he was dangerous." The crowd murmured, their brief sympathy for Joanna gone, replaced by renewed, confirmed fear. He was dangerous. He was a savage. Sheriff Cole looked at the bound hands of the Apache. He looked at the pistol in the drunk's hand. He looked at Joanna's terrified face. He knew exactly what this was. It was a setup, a lynch mob, sanctioned and paid for. But he also knew what the town saw. They saw a violent Apache, a compromised woman, and 3 heroic citizens who had stopped an escape. Nantan Greyhawk stood tall, his chest heaving, his eyes locked with the sheriff's. He had not been saved. He had just been trapped in a much, much smaller cage. And Joanna Hayes, by shouting, had just become his accidental and most damning accomplice. Sheriff Cole Maddox looked at the scene, his stomach full of sour whiskey and regret. He saw the truth. He saw Harlow's paid thugs, the pathetic failed attempt at a murder disguised as stopping an escape. He saw the bound Apache, who had fought back with his feet and his wits. He saw Joanna Hayes, pale and trembling, a victim of Harlow's cruelty and now a witness. And then he looked at Luke Harlow, who was watching him, a smug, confident look on his face. Harlow knew what the rest of the town saw, a violent savage, a compromised woman. The truth did not matter. The story was already written. "All right, that's enough," Cole shouted, his voice hoarse. He shoved his shotgun at the scar-faced man. "You 3, get back to the saloon. Now, your report is finished." The men scrambled up, muttering, and limped out, casting hateful glances at Nantan. Harlow stepped forward. "Sheriff, as a concerned citizen, I demand this man be held for trial. He is a clear and present danger." "He will be held," Cole said, his voice flat. He walked over to Nantan, cutting the ropes on his wrists with his own knife. "On your feet." Cole grabbed Nantan by the arm. "You're coming with me." He shoved Nantan toward the jail, the real one. This time, he threw him into a small, windowless cell and slammed the barred door. "I will deal with you in the morning." But the pressure did not stop. All evening, men came to the sheriff's office, men who owed money to Harlow, men who worked for him. They spoke of fear. They spoke of their wives, their children. They spoke of the Apache menace that the sheriff had let inside. By sunset, Cole Maddox was a man defeated. He knew he could not hold Nantan. A trial was impossible. It would be a circus, and Harlow would burn the town down around him. He also could not let him go. That would be political suicide, and Harlow would see he was ruined or dead. So he chose the only path left, banishment. He walked to the cell. Nantan was standing, not sitting, as if he had been waiting. "You are a plague, Apache," Cole said, his voice weary. "You have been in my town for 1 day, and I have got a lynch mob on my hands, a near riot, and the most powerful man in the territory breathing down my neck. I do not care what you did or did not do. I do not care about your debts. I am done." He unlocked the cell door.
Get your horse. I am giving you your weapons back. And your grain. The trade is honored. Nantan's eyes were unreadable in the dim light. You will ride out of Dustwell. Cole continued, his voice low and hard. You will ride north, toward the mountains, and you will not come back. If I ever see your face in this town again, I will not ask questions. I will not arrest you. I will shoot you on sight. Am I clear? Nantan Greyhawk walked out of the cell. He did not say a word. He followed Cole to the office, where his rifle, his pistol, and his knife were on the desk. He strapped his weapons on, the familiar weight a comfort. He then went to the stable, where his pinto and the sacks of grain waited. Get, Cole Maddox said, one last time. Nantan mounted his horse. The pinto's hooves were loud in the silent, empty street. The sun was a dying red smear on the horizon, bleeding into the purple hills. He rode past the saloon, past the general store, and out onto the open, darkening road. The road that led away from Dustwell. He rode with his head high, his back straight. He had his grain. He had kept his honor. He had lost everything else. He was perhaps a mile out of town when he saw her. A small wagon was pulled over on the side of the road, hidden in a cluster of mesquite. At first, he thought it was a trap. His hand went to his rifle. Then she stepped out. Joanna Hayes. She was alone. No Sam. She was holding a cloth-wrapped bundle. He pulled his pinto to a stop, his body tense, suspicious. I am sorry, she said, her voice small in the vast, open dusk. She took a few steps toward him, then stopped, as if there were a line she could not cross. I did not know they would do that. In the stable, I screamed, and I made it worse. Nantan said nothing. He watched her. The sheriff, she continued, her voice trembling. He knows it was a lie, and he let you go. No, he threw you out, just like he did not care about the truth. The truth is a stone in that town, Nantan said, his voice rough. It does not float. She looked down. I brought you this? She held out the bundle. It is just bread, from the flour you paid for, and the cough syrup. Sam is better. He did not need the whole bottle. He looked at the small offering. He did not move to take it. I do not want your food, he said. It is not a gift, she said, her voice suddenly sharp, angry. It is not charity. It is an apology. For my town, for my fear. And I believe you. About the tracks. I know what Luke Harlow is. He finally looked at her. Truly looked at her. Her face was streaked with dust, her hair falling from its bun. She was exhausted, and she was more honest than any person he had met in this land. He will not stop, Nantan said. He set the trap. It did not work. Now he will set another. I know, she whispered. My stock, my mule, my 2 cows, they are all I had left. They are gone. They are not gone, Nantan said. They are just moved. What do you mean? A man like Harlow does not just drive off cattle. That is what a thief does. Harlow is not a thief, he is a king. He secures assets. Your cattle are on his land, in a box canyon, or a hidden pasture. He is holding them, until you are broken enough to sell him your land for nothing. Joanna's face crumpled. She had known it, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. Then it is over. I cannot without the mule. I cannot even plow. Nantan was quiet for a long time. The crickets were starting their night song. A cool wind was rising. I can find them, he said. She looked up, her eyes wide, confused. What? Your stock. I can track them. I can find where he has them. But why would you are leaving? The sheriff said. The sheriff told me to ride north, Nantan said, his eyes on the dark horizon. He did not say how long it would take me to get there. He looked back at her. I will find your stock, but I need something. I have nothing, she said, her voice full of despair.
I have no money. I have nothing to pay you.
I do not want money, he said. I need one night, safe, hidden.
Here by the road.
No, the cavalry patrols this road, and Harlow's men will be riding, too. They will be looking for me. They will expect me to ride north. Just as the sheriff said, I will do what they do not expect. I will hide in the one place they think I would never go, the one place they are watching.
She understood.
My farm.
Your barn, he said.
It is empty.
My horse and I will be quiet. One night, so I can hunt in the morning. Hunt for your cattle.
She stared at him, her mind racing. The danger was overwhelming. If the town of Harlow, if anyone found out, they would not just call her an Apache widow. They would call her a traitor. They would be justified in their hate. They would burn her farm to the ground. But then she looked at his face, the face of the man who had paid for her flour, the man who had given her son a carving, the man who had been nearly killed in a stable because of a debt he owed her from a decade ago. She saw the setup. She saw the lies. She saw Luke Harlow's smug face, and she knew Nantan was right. It was not just about the cattle. It was about the land. It was about Sam. And it was about the truth.
Yes,
she said, her voice firm.
Yes, the barn. But you must be gone before the sun. No one can know.
They will not know, he said.
He took the bundle from her.
Go home. Do not use the road. Cut across the low wash. It is slower, but no one will see your wagon.
He watched her climb into the wagon, watched her turn the mule back toward her farm, taking the hidden path he had suggested. Then he, too, left the road, melting into the shadows, a ghost moving toward the house of the widow. He arrived hours later, long after the moon was up. The cabin was dark. He led his pinto into the small, rickety barn. It was, as she had said, empty, just the smell of old hay and dust. He settled his horse, then stepped back outside. He did not stay in the barn. He was Apache. He did not sleep in boxes. He found a spot in the yard, just beyond the shadow of the small porch, tucked against a low stone wall. He gathered a few, very dry sticks. He built a fire, but it was not a white man's fire. It was a warrior's fire, small, almost invisible, set in a shallow pit. It gave off almost no smoke, just a small, tight circle of bright, hot coals that gave off a surprising warmth. He sat on his heels, watching the tiny flames. He was a man of the mountains, of the open plains, and he was sitting in a white woman's yard, a few feet from her door. A target. He should have been terrified. Instead, he felt calm. He was exactly where he was not supposed to be. And for the first time, he felt he was on the hunt. The cabin door creaked open. He did not reach for his knife. He knew who it was. Sam, the boy, was in his nightshirt, his feet bare. He stood in the doorway, his eyes wide, looking at the fire and at Nantan.
You are the Apache man,
Sam whispered. I am, Nantan said, his voice quiet.
Mama said you were gone.
I am here. The boy took a hesitant step, then another. He came and stood by the small fire, looking at Nantan. He was not afraid. He was curious. Are you a ghost? Nantan almost smiled.
No, I am not a ghost.
You gave me this, Sam said, pulling the small carved hawk from inside his shirt. I did. What is it? It is a giziza, Nantan said, using the Apache word. A greyhawk. He flies where he wishes. He is free, but he is always alone.
Giziza,
Sam repeated, the word clumsy but clear on his tongue. He is lonely. He has the wind, Nantan said, and the stars. He is not lonely. He is by himself. Oh, Sam sat down, huddling by the fire, holding the carving. Will you teach me another word? It is late, small one. You should sleep. Please. Nantan looked at the boy, this small, pale
pale child of his enemy. Our word for friend, Nantan said, is shik isni. Shik isni, Sam repeated. He looked up at Nantan. Am I your shik isni? Before Nantan could answer, the door opened again. Joanna stood there, a blanket wrapped around her. She had been watching from the window. She had seen the murderer sitting by a small, polite fire, patiently talking to her son, teaching him his language. She saw her son, who was usually so shy and fearful, sitting at the feet of this savage as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Sam, she said, her voice not sharp, just tired. It is time for bed. But, Mama, Sam protested, Nantan is teaching me. Now, Sam? Sam's face fell, but he obeyed. He stood up, clutched his hawk carving. Good night, Nantan. Good night, small warrior. Sam ran inside. Joanna did not follow. She stayed in the doorway. Then, after a long moment, she stepped out onto the porch. She sat on the top step, just a few yards from him. The fire was between them. You are good with him, she said, her voice low. He is a boy. He has no hate. No, she said. He does not yet. They sat in silence. The stars in the high desert were bright, cold, and impossibly close. It felt as if they were the only two people left in the world. Why, Nantan? She finally asked. Why are you really doing this? It is not just the cattle. It is not just the debt for Little Raven. It is something else. He looked into his small fire. He thought of his father. He thought of Luke Harlow's voice in the night, shouting orders as his village burned. Your husband, Elias, Nantan said, his voice quiet. He argued with Harlow, just before he died. Joanna's head snapped up. She went very still. How did you know that? I did not. You just told me. She let out a shaky breath. Yes, he did. I heard them. He argued, Nantan said, because Harlow wanted this land, and Elias perhaps did not want to sell, or did not want to sell for the price Harlow offered. Yes, she whispered. It is not just the land he wants. Joanna. Nantan said, any man can want land. Harlow is not just any man. He wants what is under the land. Under, there is nothing. It is just rock and sand. No, Nantan said. He pointed, not with his finger, but with his chin, toward the dry, rocky arroyo at the edge of her property. There, the willows, they are still green. Even in this drought, the rocks, they are dark. They are damp in the morning. She looked. She had never thought about it. There is water, Nantan said. A spring, an underground river. My people have known about it for 1,000 seasons. It is why we always camped near this place, in this drought. Joanna, a permanent source of water that is not just valuable. It is power. It is life. It is worth more than all the gold in these hills. That is what Harlow wants. He wants to own the water. And if he owns the water, he owns this entire territory. He owns the cattle, the farms, he owns Dustwell. She was speechless. It was all there. The accidents, the pressure, the fake Apache raid, the murder of her husband, disguised as a skirmish. It was all for water. He will not stop, she whispered, her hands clenched. He will kill me, too. He will kill Sam. Yes, Nantan said. He will. She looked at him, the man across the fire, the savage, the Apache, the only person who had told her the truth. What do we do? She asked. Nantan looked at her. He saw the shift. She had said we. Tonight, he said, I am a shadow in your barn. Tomorrow, I am a hunter. I will find your cattle. I will prove he is a thief. I will give you a weapon to fight him. And what do you get? She asked. What is your price? Nantana. He looked up at the stars, at the dark outline of the hawk circling, hunting, even in the dark. I am a man without a home, he said. My people are starving. Harlow is the man whose voice I remember from the night my village burned. You are a woman with a secret that can destroy him. My price is his. A pact, a quiet, desperate, unspoken alliance was formed in the dark, over a tiny fire, between two worlds. You will be a witness, Nantan said. I will give you the proof, and you will be the one who speaks the truth, in their white man's language, that they will listen to. They will not listen to me, she said. They listened today, he reminded her. When you stood up, you stopped a lynching. You have a power you do not know. She was silent, thinking. Then she nodded once, a slow, grim acceptance. She stood up. Be gone before the sun, she said. I will be gone, he answered. She went inside, closing the door. This time, he heard the faint click of the latch not being thrown. He was not locked out. He was, for one night, locked in. Nantan Greyhawk was gone before the first hint of gray touched the sky. He moved not as a man, but as a shadow, leaving the barn and the sleeping farm behind. He did not go to the road. He followed the dry, rocky wash, his moccasins leaving almost no trace, his pinto trailing behind, its unshod hooves quiet on the stone. The tracks were easy to find. The ones in the yard had been a clumsy joke, pressed deep and obvious. They were an insult. He ignored them. He cut south, toward the low hills, and found the real trail. The gouges and scuffs of driven cattle, 2, maybe 3 heads, and alongside them, the tracks of horses. Not Apache ponies. These were deep, crescent-shaped prints, left by iron horseshoes, a white man's tracks. He followed them, moving fast. The trail did not lead north, toward the mountains where his people were. It led east, directly toward the vast, sprawling territory controlled by Luke Harlow. As the sun rose, painting the rocks in shades of blood and gold, he found the second sign. He had reached the arroyo, the deep, dry riverbed that bordered Joanna's land. The cattle tracks moved through it, but Nantan's eyes were drawn to something else. Wagon ruts, heavy ones. They were fresh, biting deep into the hard-packed soil, and they were loaded. He knelt, scraping the dirt. Splinters of wood, fresh-cut pine. He looked toward the high, rocky part of the arroyo, the place he had pointed out to her, the place with the willows. The wagon tracks led straight toward it, hauling lumber. Harlow was not just planning to take the water. He was already building on it. A dam, a diversion, a pump house. He was stealing the spring, the lifeblood of the land. Right under her nose. This was the proof. This was the weapon she needed. He turned, his pinto already sensing his urgency, and began the quick, silent ride back. He did not know that the trap was already closing. Joanna Hayes had been awake for hours. She had watched Nantan disappear into the pre-dawn darkness. Now she sat at her small table, watching Sam trace the outline of the carved hawk with his finger. The silence in the cabin was heavy, thick with fear and a strange, new resolve. The sound of hoofbeats made her heart leap into her throat. It was not one horse. There were several. She ran to the window. Luke Harlow was riding into her yard. The scar-faced man from the stable at his side, along with 3 other men she recognized as saloon fixtures. They were not here to talk. They were here to finish things. Harlow swung down from his horse, his black coat immaculate even in the dust. He walked to her porch as if he already owned it. He was holding a piece of paper and a pen. "Good morning, widow," he called out, his voice thick with false cheer. "A fine day for settling accounts." Joanna stepped onto the porch. She kept her hand on the doorframe, her body blocking the entrance. "I have no accounts to settle with you. Mr. Harlow, get off my land." Harlow chuckled. "Your land, that is a very optimistic way of putting it." He looked around, at the broken corral, the ransacked storehouse. "It seems you have had a run of bad luck, lost your stock, wasting your food. It is a hard thing for a woman alone." especially one with questionable taste in friends. He held up the paper. I am a generous man. I am prepared to offer you $500, cash, for this worthless patch of dirt. More than fair. It will be enough to get you and the boy on a stagecoach to somewhere civilized, before this land swallows you whole. No, Joanna said. The word was quiet, but it was solid as stone. My land is not for sale. Harlow's smile vanished. The mask of the businessman was gone, replaced by the predator. You are in debt to the store. You have no stock to sell. You have no mule to plow. You have a sick child and a reputation so soiled it stinks to high heaven. You have nothing. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a low, threatening growl. And we all know you had that savage here last night, after he ran out of town, after he was seen attacking my men. You are harboring a fugitive. Joanna, a murderer. He did not, she started. I do not care, Harlow roared, his face turning red. He stepped onto the porch, towering over her. Do you think anyone will care what you say the Apache's widow you signed this paper? No. Harlow looked past her, into the cabin, at Sam, who was watching with wide, terrified eyes. That is a fine boy you have. It would be a tragedy if something happened to him, if the Apaches got desperate, or if, say, the cabin was to catch fire.
The scar-faced man unholstered his pistol. Should I check the barn? Boss, make sure the rat is not still hiding in there.
He is not there, Harlow said, his eyes locked on Joanna's. But he will be. They always come back. And when he does, you and that boy, you will just be caught in the middle. It is a terrible thing, a crossfire. Now sign the paper. He was not just threatening her. He was promising her. He was going to kill her, take the land and the water, and call it a tragedy.
And then, from the high ridge overlooking the farm, a new sound came, a sharp cry, not a bird. One of Harlow's men looked up, his hand shading his eyes. Boss, look! On the ridgeline, silhouetted against the bright morning sky, were 4 riders. They were still watching. They were Apache. It was Little Raven. He had come looking for Nantan. He had tracked him, worried after the stories from the town. Now he saw it all, Nantan's pinto, tied near the barn, the white woman's cabin, and 5 armed white men surrounded the house. To Little Raven, the story was simple. The white woman had trapped his cousin. These men were here to kill him. She was one of them. They were all one of them. This is the white man's trap, Little Raven screamed in Apache, his voice carrying on the rising wind. They will pay. Just then, Nantan burst from the wash at a full gallop. He rode his pinto straight into the yard, planting himself between Harlow's men and the front porch. He was a whirlwind of dust and fury. His arrival stunned everyone into silence. Harlow was the first to recover. He let out a bark of triumphant laughter. Well, I will be damned. He was here, the rat caught in the trap, men. You see it, he is with her. It is an attack. Nantan, Little Raven shrieked from the ridge. We are here, we will free you, death to these white eyes. No, Nantan shouted. His head turned to the ridge. It is a trick, Idu-Ada, stay back. Harlow's men were spinning, their guns drawn, confused by the shouting. What the hell is going on? There are more of them. And then, as if summoned by the chaos, the world began to change. The wind, which had been rising, began to howl. A sickly yellow-brown cloud was rolling in from the east, a dust storm. The air became thick, static, hard to breathe. The scar-faced man, his eyes on the ridge, panicking, raised his rifle. They are attacking. He fired a shot at the ridge. The bullet pinged off the rocks. Nowhere near Little Raven, but it was enough. That single shot tore the world apart. Little Raven saw the muzzle flash. This was war. This was the only answer white men understood. He raised his own rifle, took careful aim, and fired back. Not at the man who had shot, but at the man next to him. One of Harlow's men grunted, grabbing his shoulder, and fell sideways from his horse.
He screamed as his foot caught in the stirrup. "A raid!" Harlow bellowed, pure, joyful rage on his face. He drew his pistol. "It is an Apache raid. She brought them here. Kill them all. Kill the savage in the yard." Miles away, in Dustwell, Sheriff Cole Maddox heard the faint, rapid pop-pop-pop of gunfire carried in the wind. He stepped out of his office, sniffing the air, feeling the grit. "My God," he muttered. "The storm and gunfire. From Hayes Place." Harlow was right. The savage went back. "It is an attack." He turned. "Deputy, ring the bell. Get a posse. We ride." Nantan was trapped. He was in a vortex of his own making. In front of him, Harlow and his men were taking cover behind the wagon, their pistols aimed at him. Behind him, on the ridge, his own cousin was firing, his bullets meant for the white men, but kicking up dust all around. And on the porch, Joanna stood frozen, clutching her son. He had to choose, his people or her, the past or this new, fragile, terrifying present. He made the choice. He turned his back on the ridge, on his cousin, on the Apache way of war. He looked at Joanna. "Inside," he roared, his voice a command. "Get Sam. Get under the floor. Get away from the windows, now." He leaped from his horse, grabbing Joanna by the arm, and shoved her toward the cabin door. "Go!" She stumbled, pulling Sam with her. Sam was crying, a thin, terrified wail that was lost in the wind. Nantan stopped in the doorway. He saw it, leaning against the wall, coated in dust, just where she had left it. Elias Hayes's old Winchester rifle. He let his Apache bow, his father's weapon, clatter to the porch floor. He grabbed the white man's gun. It felt heavy, cold, alien in his hands. "He is in the cabin," the scar-faced man yelled, his voice thin in the growing storm. "Burn him out! Burn the whole place down!" The man ran toward the porch, a lit torch in his hand, one he must have had ready. Nantan stepped back out onto the porch. Just as the sandstorm hit with the force of a solid wall, the world vanished, dissolved into a screaming, brown-yellow chaos. He could barely see the man with the torch, a dark shadow in the swirling grit. He raised the rifle to his shoulder. He worked the lever, the thwack-thwack of the action a metallic counterpoint to the wind's scream. He did not fire at the man. He fired at the torch. The bullet struck the burning brand, exploding it in a shower of sparks that were instantly swallowed by the storm. The man screamed and fell back. Nantan Greyhawk stood on the porch of the widow's house, the wind tearing at his hair, the grit stinging his skin. The storm was a curtain, hiding the ridge, hiding the men in the yard. He was alone, in the center. In his hands, he held the rifle of his enemy. At his hip, he wore the knife of his people. He was a man of two worlds, belonging to neither. And now, he was at war with both. The dust storm was a living, breathing monster. It shrieked, tearing at the cabin, ripping shingles from the roof. The world was gone, replaced by a roaring, suffocating brown. Nantan stood on the porch, Elias Hayes's rifle in his hands, tasting the grit on his teeth. He could hear nothing but the wind and the terrified, muffled sobs of Sam from inside. The shots had stopped. He did not know if Harlow's men had fled, or if they were just hiding, waiting. He did not know if Little Raven was still on the ridge, or if he, too, had taken cover from the storm's fury. He slipped back inside, barring the door. The cabin was almost dark, the air thick with fine dust that burned his lungs. Joanna was on the floor, huddled over Sam, her body a shield. "Are they gone?" she whispered, her voice a raw rasp. "I do not know," Nantan said. He leaned the rifle against the wall. "But the storm is our only friend. It is hiding us. It is also hiding them." He went to the small, dirty window, but he could see nothing, just a wall of moving earth. "Little Raven," Nantan said, more to himself. "My cousin. He is young. He sees only hate." "He was shooting," Joanna whispered.
He shot at one of them. He thought you were a trap, Nantan said, his voice flat. He thought I was a prisoner. He saw white men with guns, and he did what he has been taught to do. And you? She asked, looking up, her eyes just visible in the gloom. You shot at them, too. You stood on my porch. You used his gun.
Nantan looked at the Winchester.
I stood on your porch.
He did not say anything else. The storm howled for what felt like an eternity, an hour, maybe 2. Then, as quickly as it had come, the wind began to die. The roar softened to a moan, then a whisper. The brown darkness outside lightened to a sickly yellow, then a pale, dusty gray. Nantan put his hand on the door.
We must go.
Go! Joanna scrambled to her feet.
Go where the storm is not even over.
It is over enough, and soon the others will come. The others. Harlow. He will go back to Dustwell. He will say what we both heard him say. It is an Apache raid. The widow is with them. The sheriff heard the shots. He is already on his way. But he is not coming to save you, Joanna. He is coming to hunt us. The blood drained from her face.
Hunt us, but I did nothing. This is my home.
It is not your home anymore, Nantan said, his voice hard, but not unkind. You stood against them in the store. You brought me water in the stable. You were here when my cousin opened fire. You are not a white woman to them now. You are a traitor. You are the Apache's widow. They will put a rope on me, and they will put you in a cage. Or worse. We cannot be here when they come.
Sam?
She whispered, looking at her son, who was watching them with wide, silent eyes. He is sick. I cannot take him out there.
He will be sicker when this house is on fire,
Nantan said.
We must go, now, while the dust is still thick.
He grabbed the last of the bread she had, and the small bit of cough syrup. He slung his rifle, the one he had traded for, onto his back, but he kept the Winchester in his hand. Is there water? She pointed to a canteen. He took it. Get a blanket, the warmest one you have. Get your son. She did not argue. She saw the truth in his eyes. She wrapped Sam in a thick, patched quilt. Nantan unbarred the door. The world outside was new and terrible. The yard was buried under a layer of fine, red sand. The air was cold, the sky a strange, bruised purple. He found his pinto, huddled against the lee side of the barn, covered in dust but unharmed. Joanna's mule was gone, likely fled in the storm.
There is only one horse,
she said, her voice breaking. It is enough. He lifted Sam, who was small for his age, and placed him in the pinto's saddle. Hold on, he told the boy. Sam's small hands gripped the saddle horn. Nantan then mounted, settling himself behind Sam, his body a shield for the child. He held the rifle in one hand, the reins in the other. He looked down at Joanna.
I cannot walk,
she said. You will not. He leaned down, his arms circling her waist, and in one smooth, powerful motion, he lifted her from the ground, seating her in front of him, her legs draped over one side, her body pressed against his, with Sam held securely between them. The pinto snorted at the weight, but held firm.
Where are we going?
She whispered, her voice muffled against his chest. To the one place they will not look, he said. They will think we ran for the mountains. They will think we ran for the town. We will run for the water. We will run for the Red River. He urged the pinto forward, not at a run, but at a steady, ground-eating walk. He did not take the road. He cut across the arroyo, toward the hills, moving like a ghost into the dying, dusty light. They traveled all night. The stars came out, hard and bright in a sky scrubbed clean by the storm. The silence was absolute, broken only by the clop of the pinto's hooves on the rock and the sound of their own breathing. Sam, held warm and secure between them, fell asleep, his head resting against Nantan's chest. Nantan told her stories as they rode.
His voice a low rumble, not for her, but for the boy, to keep the fear at bay. He told him of his own village, of the way the smoke smelled in the morning, of the games the boys played, of the old storyteller who knew the song of the stars. He spoke of a life that was gone, his voice full of a quiet, aching loss that matched her own. Joanna listened. She was pressed against him, his warmth seeping into her, his arm a solid presence around her. She had been terrified of this man. Now she did not know what she felt. She only knew that his body was the only thing between her and a world that wanted her dead. Just before dawn, he stopped. "We are here." She looked around. They were in a narrow canyon, a deep cut in the red rock. It was invisible from the plain. Willows and cottonwoods grew thick along a shallow, gurgling stream. The water, even in the dim light, was the color of dark rust. "The Red River," he said. He dismounted, then gently lifted Sam down, still wrapped in the blanket. He laid the sleeping boy on a soft patch of sand. Then he turned and held up his arms for Joanna. She slid down, her legs weak. When her feet touched the ground, she stumbled. He caught her. For a long moment, they stood there, his hands on her waist, her hands on his shoulders. They were no longer riders and burdens. They were just a man and a woman, standing by a river in the dark. She pulled away, her face flushing. "I thank you." He nodded. He set about making a camp. He did not make a big fire. He built one of his small, smokeless warrior's fires, tucked between two boulders. The heat was contained, the light almost invisible. He led the pinto to the water, letting it drink. Joanna sat, pulling the blanket around her shoulders, and watched Sam sleep. The place was peaceful. It was the first time in 2 days she had not been afraid. Nantan sat across the small fire from her. He said nothing, simply staring into the flames. "You told me," she said, her voice quiet, "that you remembered Harlow's voice, from the night your village." He looked up. His eyes were dark and full of ghosts. "Yes, I want to know." He was silent for a long time. The river whispered beside them. He was not a soldier. He was there for the bounty. The government paid for Apache scalps. But Harlow was not there for the money. He was there for the land. Our land. It, too, had a spring. He came with the soldiers, and with his own men, the ones in no uniform. He gave the orders. He pointed. "Burn that one! Do not damage the well." I was a boy. I hid. I watched him. I watched him laugh as he shot my father. He held up his hand. "I hate many men. I hate the soldiers who came. I hate the settlers who took our land. But him," he curled his hand into a fist, "he is not a man I hate. He is a demon I must send back to the earth." Joanna's face was wet with tears. Not for him, but for the shared, ugly truth. "He killed my husband, too." Nantan looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Elias," she said, the words spilling out, the confession she had held for a year. He was not a good man. He was weak and greedy. Harlow found that. He offered Elias a partnership, money, a new life, away from here, away from me and Sam. "He was going to sell you the land," Nantan said. It was not a question. "Yes," she whispered. "All of it, including the water." Elias knew about the water. He was going to sell it and leave. He was not going to take us with him, but he got greedy. I heard them arguing, the night of the explosion. Elias wanted more money. He said he would tell the cavalry about Harlow's other business. He tried to blackmail him. She shuddered. And the next day, there was an Apache raid and an accidental explosion in our wagon, where Elias kept the dynamite for the well. It was not an accident. Harlow killed him. He murdered his own partner to get the land and to silence him. And he made me the victim, the Apache's widow. They were silent. 2 people, from 2 different worlds, bound by the same enemy, the same murderer.
I am so tired, she whispered, her head sinking. I am so tired of being alone. She looked at him, the man who had seen his father murdered by the same voice that had murdered her husband. Do I look like them to you?
What?
Do you hate me? She asked, the words raw. I am one of them. I am a white woman. I am the wife of a man who probably would have shot your father, too, if he had the chance. Do you look at me and see them?
Nantan looked at her. He saw the face of the girl who had knelt in the mud, her hands trembling. To save his cousin. He saw the face of the woman who had stood between him and Harlow's pistol. He saw the face of the mother who had stared down a mob. For him.
I do not see them, he said, his voice low. I see a woman who saved Little Raven. I saw a woman who stood in front of a gun. I saw a woman who brought me water when I was tied. I do not hate the color of your skin. I hate the shadow in Luke Harlow's heart. The fire crackled. The space between them felt impossibly small. The night air was cold, and she shivered, pulling the thin blanket tighter. Without a word, Nantan stood. He unfastened the heavy, wool-lined Apache cloak he wore, the one that had seen him through a dozen winters. He walked around the fire. He did not hand it to her. He knelt behind her, and he draped it over her shoulders, pulling the heavy folds around her. His warmth and the scent of him wood smoke, leather, and the clean, sharp smell of the desert enveloped her. She leaned back, her head resting against his chest, her eyes closing. He did not move away. He stayed there, his body a solid wall against the cold, his arms drawing the cloak tighter, his hands resting on her shoulders. She felt his breath on her hair. She felt the slow, steady beat of his heart against her back. It was a heart, just a heart, like hers. It was not a savage heart. It was not a white heart. It was just a heart, beating in the dark. Nantan, she whispered. I am here. She turned, slowly, in the circle of his arms, in the shelter of his cloak. She turned to face him. The firelight played on his face, on the hard lines, the high cheekbones, the scar on his temple. His eyes were on her, and they were no longer dark. They were full of fire. She did not know who moved first. Perhaps neither of them. Perhaps it was the night, the river, the shared grief. Her hand came up, her fingers touching the scar on his temple. His hand came up, his thumb brushing the tear track on her cheek. And then he kissed her. It was not a kiss of passion, not of lust. It was a kiss of discovery. It was a kiss of raw, desperate, aching loneliness. A loneliness that two people had carried, and that they suddenly, for one moment, set down. It was deep and slow, and it tasted of wood smoke and dust and tears. It was a kiss that said, "You are not alone. I am here. I see you." They had a night that belonged to them, where scars were touched as part of each other, with no border but their heartbeats and the sound of the river. When the kiss broke, they did not move apart. They rested their foreheads together, breathing the same air. I will take the first watch, he whispered, his voice rough. He helped her lie down by the fire, with Sam tucked against her, and he covered them both with a heavy cloak. He then took the Winchester, and he climbed the small cliff, to a place where he could see the canyon entrance, a dark hawk watching over his new, fragile, impossible family. He did not sleep, but as the first pale light of dawn touched the sky, he closed his eyes, just for a moment, and he dreamed. He dreamed he saw a gray hawk, his giziza. It was flying, not in the open sky, but in the narrow space between two towering mountains, two canyon walls that were closing in. The hawk was free, but it was trapped, and then he saw, on the hawk's back, a single, tiny, burning ember, a spark of fire. It was not a destroying fire. It was a fire to see by, a light to show the way, but also a fire that could, at any moment, be fanned into a blaze that would consume the world.
The town of Dustwell was a hornet's nest, buzzing with a fear that had turned hard and mean. The news had spread like wildfire, carried by Luke Harlow himself, who had ridden back in a manufactured panic, his face a mask of righteous fury. The Apache's widow, he had declared, was gone, taken, kidnapped by the murdering savage Nantan, who, it was now clear, was the leader of a renegade war party hiding in the hills. The attack on the farm had not been a raid. It had been a rescue of the savage by his woman. They had fled together, a traitor and her lover, leaving a wounded man and a trail of chaos. Luke Harlow was a master storyteller. By the time the sun was high, he had organized a posse of more than 24 men. They were not a posse, they were a lynch mob. He stood on the porch of the saloon, handing out rifles and whiskey. "We ride to save the widow," he shouted, his voice thick with feigned concern. "We ride to rescue her from her own madness and to wipe this Apache menace from our lands forever." Sheriff Cole Maddox stood by, his badge feeling heavy and useless. He knew, deep in his gut, that this was all wrong, but he was trapped. To stand against Harlow now was to admit he was in league with the savages himself. He was swept up in the tide, a man of the law, forced to lead a lawless mob. Old Ben Carter watched from behind his bar, his face like sour stone. He saw the farmer, Abner, the one Harlow had been strong-arming, now taking a rifle, his eyes full of fear. He saw the scar-faced man, his hand bandaged from his fight in the stable, now deputy in charge. This was not justice. This was an extermination. In the hidden canyon of the Red River, the world was quiet. The fire had died. Nantan had returned from the high rocks, his face set. Joanna saw the shift in him. The hunted look was gone, replaced by the cold, sharp focus of a warrior. "He is coming," Nantan said, not as a guess, but as a fact. "He has the town whipped into a froth. He is leading a posse." Joanna's hands went cold. She pulled Sam closer. "We have to run," she whispered, her voice frantic. "We have to go deeper into the mountains, where they cannot find us." "No," Nantan said. She looked at him, uncomprehending. "No, Nantan. They are 24 men. They have rifles. They will kill us. They will kill Sam." "If we run," Nantan said, his voice low and steady, "we are guilty. I will forever be the Apache who stole the widow. You will be the white woman who betrayed her race. We will run until we die. There is no mountain high enough to hide from that lie." He knelt in front of her, taking her hands. They were cold. He held them, warming them on his own. "The only way to kill a lie, Joanna, is with the truth. A truth so loud it deafs them. We cannot run from Dustwell. We must ride into it." She recoiled. "He is mad. They will shoot us before we cross the main street." "They will not," Nantan said. "Not if they are not sure. Not if we do what they do not expect." He looked at Sam, who was watching, his eyes wide. "Courage is not being without fear, small warrior. It is being afraid, and mounting the horse anyway." He stood. "I have a plan, but I need you. I have the proof of the water, the lumber. You have the truth of the murder. We will give them both." He left the canyon, moving like a snake through the rocks. He found Little Raven and his warriors where he knew they would be, watching, waiting, angry and confused. "You were right, Nantan," Little Raven said, his face hard with shame. "The shot was a trap. I fell for it." "The trap is not yet closed." Nantan said, "I am going back. Into the town." "It is suicide." "I am going with her," Nantan said. "And the boy. I do not want you to fight. I want you to watch. From the roofs, from the alleys. Be my Giziza, my hawk. If Harlow's men fire, you fire. Not to kill, you hit their guns. You hit their hands. You create chaos. You show them that the truth has teeth." Little Raven nodded, his eyes bright. This was a new kind of warfare. He understood it. Joanna, meanwhile, had found her own way. Old Ben, half expecting this, had sent one of his men scouting. The man found the canyon. Joanna gave him a message, her voice shaking but firm. "Tell Ben I am alive, and I am not a prisoner. Tell him I ride in at noon. Tell him to gather any man who has a spine, any man who Luke Harlow has ever cheated. Tell him to stand on the saloon porch. I will need a witness who is not Apache." Noon, the sun was a hammer. Dustwell was a tinderbox. The posse was mounted, restless. Luke Harlow was on his fine black horse, a new rifle in his saddle scabbard. Sheriff Cole was beside him, looking sick. And then they heard it, a single horse. "He is coming," a man yelled, raising his rifle. "Hold your fire," Cole shouted. "Hold your fire! Where is the war party?" They looked. It was one horse, a pinto. It was Nantan Greyhawk, riding slowly, his hands in plain sight. "It's just him," a man whispered. "He's alone. He's surrendering." "Kill him," Harlow hissed. "Shoot him now." "Wait," old Ben Carter said, his voice like a rusty hinge. From the saloon porch, "Look again." The men looked. Nantan was not alone. Behind him, sitting on the horse's rump, her arms wrapped tight around his waist, her face pressed against his back, was Joanna Hayes. She was not tied. She was holding him. The town went dead silent. And then another horse, the Pinto's twin. It was Little Raven, his face bare, not painted for war. He was leading a small horse, and on it, holding the carved wooden hawk, was Sam. The Apache had ridden into town for grain once. He had been sentenced to death. Today he returned, and he had the widow at his back. Not as a captive, but as a man who dared to stand with her before an entire hostile world. Nantan stopped in the center of the street. He swung down from the Pinto. He turned, his hands going to Joanna's waist. He lifted her down, setting her gently on her feet. He then went and lifted Sam from his horse, placing the boy beside his mother, his small hand instantly gripping her skirt. Luke Harlow stared, his face a mask of disbelief and pure, black rage. This was not his story. This was not the narrative he had written. You, he sputtered, finding his voice. It was a shriek. "You see the filth of it. He has bewitched her. She is a traitor, a savage's whore. He brings his whelps, his warriors, into our street." He pointed a shaking finger at Cole. "Sheriff, do your duty. Arrest this murderer. Arrest this woman for treason." Sheriff Cole, his face pale, unholstered his pistol, but he did not aim it. "Mrs. Hayes, Joanna, are you here of your own free will?" Joanna Hayes took a step forward. Sam whimpered, and she put a hand on his head. She was shaking, but her voice was a bell. "I am, Sheriff." He did not force you. He saved me." "Sheriff," she said, her voice ringing across the silent street. "He saved my son. He saved us from him." She raised her arm, her fingers shaking, and pointed it straight at Luke Harlow. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Harlow laughed, a high, strangled sound. "I was leading a posse to save you. He led a war party. He attacked your farm." "There was no war party," Joanna cried, her voice breaking with fury. "There was Luke Harlow. He came to my farm to force me to sell. He threatened my son. He was going to kill us. His men fired first. He came to my farm to get the land he murdered my husband for." The word hung in the air, heavy and lethal. "Murder." "Murder," Cole repeated, his gun lowering. "Yes, murder." Joanna was weeping now, but her voice was strong. "You all know the story. Elias died in an Apache skirmish, an accidental explosion. It was a lie. He died because he was Luke Harlow's partner. He died because Harlow wanted the land. And my husband got too greedy. I heard them arguing. The night he died." She told them everything. The partnership, the greed, the argument, the accident was a bomb. "Lies!" Harlow screamed, his face purple. The ravings of a madwoman. She's been with the savage. Her mind is poisoned. There is no proof. Then what about the water? Nantan spoke. His voice was not loud, but it cut through Harlow's screaming. Harlow froze. He does not want the land, Nantan continued, stepping forward, his hands open. He wants what is under it, the spring, the living water, the one my people have known for 1,000 seasons, the one he is building a dam on, right now, with stolen lumber. The lumber he stole from the army, just like the rifles he used to massacre my people years ago. Nantan reached into his pouch. He threw a piece of wood into the dust at Cole's feet. It was stenciled, U.S. Army. And my cattle? Joanna cried. The ones he said you stole. Nantan, they are not in the mountains. They are in his hidden pasture, east of here. The ones he stole to break me. She is right, old Ben Carter said, stepping off the porch, his shotgun held low. I sent a man. He found the cattle. He found the dam. He found the army lumber. It is all true. Luke, all of it. The crowd was turning. The men in the posse were looking at each other, then at Harlow. They were not a lynch mob anymore. They were witnesses. Luke Harlow saw it. He saw his world, his power, his entire empire of fear, dissolving in the high noon sun. He was finished. He was ruined. He had one last card to play. You are lying filth, he snarled, his eyes wild, his gaze locking on Nantan. This is my town. You think you can die first? He drew his pistol. He was fast. But Nantan was faster. He did not reach for his own gun. He did not dive for cover. He moved, but not to save himself. He lunges, a human shield, grabbing Joanna and Sam, pulling them behind him, tackling them to the ground as he covers them with his own body. Harlow's first shot went wild, exploding a storefront window. Crack! A second shot, from a rooftop. Not from Harlow. It was Little Raven. The bullet was a miracle. It struck the pistol in Harlow's hand, shattering the bone, sending the gun spinning into the dust. Harlow screamed, a high, inhuman sound of pain and rage. The street exploded. Ambush! Harlow's men shouted, drawing their own guns. Crack, crack, crack. Shots rained down from the roofs. Little Raven and his warriors were not aiming at men. They were aiming at guns. A rifle was shot from a man's hands. Another man dropped his pistol, yelping, as a bullet struck the water trough beside him. It was chaos. Nantan was on his feet. He had his knife in his hand. He had one target. He sprinted at Harlow. Harlow, clutching his mangled, bloody hand, screamed in animal fury. He used his good hand to draw a second, smaller pistol from his belt. They met in the middle of the street. Harlow fired. The shot was at point-blank range, a flash of orange and black smoke. Nantan grunted, a deep, shuddering sound, as the bullet tore into his left shoulder, spinning him halfway around. But his momentum was too great. He crashed into Harlow, his body a battering ram. The knife held high. They fell together in the red dust, a terrible tangle of hate and blood. Nantan was wounded, his blood pouring, but his fury was primal. He was on top. He saw the gun in Harlow's hand, and he smashed his fist into the man's face. The gun dropped. Harlow was a big man, fighting for his life, but Nantan was a warrior. The fight was ugly and short. Nantan was on Harlow's chest, his left arm useless, his right hand holding the antler-handled knife. He raised it high, the blade glinting in the sun, aiming for the black heart of the man who had destroyed his family and his own. Nantan, no. It was Joanna, her scream. He froze. The knife was at Harlow's throat. He was shaking, his own blood dripping onto the face of his enemy. He looked at her. She was standing, her face a mask of terror, holding her son. He looked at the sheriff, who was just watching, stunned. He looked at the town, all of them, watching. He looked back at Harlow, the demon, who was weeping, his eyes wide with the fear he had given so many others. with a final, guttural roar. Nantan did not cut. He reversed the knife. He slammed the heavy antler butt into Harlow's temple. Once, twice. The big man went limp, his eyes rolling back. Defeated, broken, finished. Nantan stayed there, on top of him, his chest heaving. Then he tried to stand. He pushed himself up, staggering, the knife still in his hand, covered in his own blood. The strength left him. He looked at Joanna, his eyes full of a life's worth of pain and a love he did not know how to name. Then he collapsed, face first, into the red dust of Dustwell. Silence. The gunfire had stopped. Little Raven was gone. The town stood, frozen, looking at the broken, unconscious body of the most powerful man in the territory, and at the Apache warrior who had, in saving them, given his own life. For a long time, the only sound in the street was the wind, and the quiet, terrible dripping of Nantan's blood onto the red dust. Joanna was the first to move. She ran to him, falling to her knees in the dirt beside his still form. "Nantan," she whispered, her hands hovering, afraid to touch. "Oh God, Nantan!" Sam ran after her, his small face pale with terror. He grabbed Nantan's one good hand, the one not slick with blood. "He is not dead," the boy whispered, a question and a desperate prayer. "Is he? Mama, he is not dead. The Grey Hawk, he cannot be dead." Old Ben Carter was the next. He walked out, his shotgun held low, and nudged the unconscious, groaning form of Luke Harlow with his boot. "He is done," Ben said. He then looked at Nantan. "But this one, he is not." He turned to the stunned, silent crowd. "What are you all staring at, get this murdering bastard?" he said, kicking Harlow again. "And lock him in the jail, the real one. He can have the Apache's cell." He then pointed to two men he trusted. "You and you, help me get the Indian inside. He is bleeding all over my street." There was a moment of hesitation. The townspeople looked at each other, their faces a mixture of fear, awe, and a deep, ingrained hatred that was hard to shake. "He is an Apache," one man stammered. "He is a man," old Ben roared, his voice cracking. "And he is the only man here who had the guts to do what needed doing. Now move." Slowly, awkwardly, two farmers, the same men who had probably wanted to lynch Nantan that morning, stepped forward. With Joanna's help, they gently, clumsily, lifted Nantan's unconscious body. His blood left a dark trail as they carried him, not to the jail, but into the saloon. There was no doctor's office in Dustwell, no infirmary. There was only old Ben's bar. They laid him on a long, wooden table, the one usually used for poker. "Get me whiskey," Ben ordered. "The good stuff, and all the clean rags you got, and boil water, a lot of it." Joanna did not leave his side. She was covered in his blood, her hands shaking, but her face was set in a mask of grim determination. She found the wound in his shoulder. The bullet had gone clean through, a ragged, terrible hole that was pouring his life out. She pressed one of the clean rags against it, her entire body leaning on him, trying to stop the bleeding. The townspeople gathered at the saloon doors, peering in, whispering. They did not dare come close. They watched as the Apache's widow tended to the savage, her face streaked with tears and dirt, her small son standing guard, holding the Apache's hand. "Do not die," Sam whispered, over and over. "Please, Giziza, do not die." Sheriff Cole Maddox did not stay. He had watched them carry Nantan inside. He had seen his deputy lock a moaning, bleeding Luke Harlow in the cell. He had looked at the faces of his town, confused and leaderless. He knew what he had to do. He had to see the truth for himself. He deputized 3 men, not Harlow's men, but quiet farmers he knew, men who had been hurt by Harlow's land grabs. "We are riding out," Cole said, his voice flat, "to Harlow's eastern pasture, and then to the arroyo. We are going to see some cattle and some lumber." They rode out, a small, grim posse, finally on the side of the law. The sun set. The saloon was lit by a dozen kerosene lamps. Old Ben had pried the bullet from Nantan's shoulder, a mangled piece of lead. He had poured raw whiskey into the wound. Nantan had not even flinched. He was so deep in the darkness. Joanna had stitched the wound closed with a needle and thread, her stitches small and neat, just as they had been on her own patched dress. She had washed the blood from his skin. She saw the old scars, the thin white lines of a hard life. She saw the massive, ruined scar on his back, the one from the night his village died. She traced it with her fingers, her heart aching with a pain that was no longer just her own. For 2 days, he did not wake. He burned with fever. Joanna and Sam never left. Old Ben brought them food, and he kept the saloon closed. "The bar is shut," he wrote on a sign. "Go pray in the church, or go home." The town waited. They were in a strange, silent limbo. The king was in a cell. The monster was on a table. And they were, for the first of their lives, free to think for themselves. And they were divided. "A savage is a savage," the older, harder men said, the ones who had fought in the wars. "He saved us, maybe, but he only did it for his own reasons. He brought his war party. He is no better than Harlow." But others, the ones like Abner, the farmer Harlow had been cheating. They saw it differently. "He listened," Abner said, his voice quiet. Harlow, he just talked. He never listened. That Apache, he looked at me. And the widow, she was telling the truth. We all knew Harlow was a snake. We were just too scared to say it. And that Indian, he was not. The town was split between the old hate and a new, uncomfortable truth. High in the mountains, the Apache were split. Too. Little Raven had returned, his heart a stone of rage. "They shot him," he told the elders, his voice cracking. "Nantan is wounded. He may be dead. He fell for her, for a white woman. He turned his back on us, for her, and then they shot him." The war chiefs were angry. "He has brought shame. He has mixed his blood with the white eyes. He is no longer one of us." "We must ride," Little Raven insisted. "We must ride down. If he is dead, we will take his body, and we will burn that town to the ground for what they did. We will have our vengeance." But the old council, the elders, were hesitant. They had seen too many vengeful rides. They knew what came after. The blue coats, the army, the long, terrible marches to the reservations. "We will wait," the oldest of them said. "We will send a scout. We will see. Vengeance is a hot meal, but wisdom is a cold spring." On the 3rd day, Sheriff Cole Maddox returned. He rode into town, not as a defeated man, but as a changed one. He was covered in dust, his face grim. He was not alone. Behind him, being herded by his 3 deputies, was Joanna Hayes's mule and her 2 scrawny cows. He rode to the saloon and dismounted. He walked inside. Joanna looked up, her face exhausted. Nantan was still, but his breathing was easier. The fever had not broken, but it had not won. "Mrs. Hayes," Cole said, taking off his hat. It was all true. He spoke to her, but the whole saloon, which had been filled with curious townspeople, listened. "We found them, your stock, in a hidden box canyon, just like you said. And the dam, my God, the dam, he was turning the whole Red River, and the lumber army stamped, enough to build a fortress." He held up a leather-bound book. "And we found this, his ledger. He had it all written down. The land he stole, the men he paid, the accidents he arranged. He had Elias Hayes's name in here, marked paid in full with interest." Joanna closed her eyes, a long, shuddering sigh of relief and of pain escaping her. It was over. The truth was out. Cole looked at the townspeople. "Joanna Hayes told the truth. And this man," he pointed to Nantan, he told the truth, and we were too blind and too scared to listen.
We let a monster rule us because he was our monster.
He turned to leave, and at that moment, a voice, dry as a snake's skin, whispered from the table. "Water." Joanna's head snapped around. "Nantan." His eyes were open, just slits. They were clouded with fever, but they were open, and he was looking at her. She grabbed the cup of water, her hands shaking so hard she spilled it. She lifted his head, helping him drink. He coughed, and it was a terrible, racking sound. "Easy," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Easy, Nantan. You are safe." "Joanna," he breathed. "I am here, little raven," Nantan rasped, his eyes struggling to focus. He will be angry. He will do something foolish. "Hush," she said. "Do not talk. Just rest." "No," Nantan said, his hand, the one Sam was not holding, weakly gripping her arm. His strength was surprising. "No rest. Get him, get the sheriff. It is not finished." A scout was sent, a truce flag was raised, and that evening, Little Raven, his face a mask of stone, came not as a warrior, but as an emissary. He walked into the saloon, his eyes blazing, and saw his cousin, pale and wounded, lying on a white man's table, being tended by a white woman. "You are a fool, cousin," Little Raven spat in Apache. "You are weak. You spill your blood for them." "I spilled my blood," Nantan whispered, his voice stronger now, his eyes clear, "to stop more blood from being spilled. Listen to me. Harlow is finished, but his hate remains, in them and in you. They are our enemy." "If we ride down here with fire," Nantan said, "then yes, they are, and they will call the soldiers, and the soldiers will come, and we will be wiped out." "For what? For one dead man, who was already dead?" "Then what?" Little Raven demanded. "We do nothing, we let them shoot you, and we smile." "No," Nantan said. "We do something new." He looked at Sheriff Cole, who was standing, his hat in his hands. "Sheriff, my people are starving. Your town needs its trade routes. They are not safe. Other tribes, white outlaws, they raid the wagons." Cole looked at him. "What are you saying?" "My warriors," Nantan said. "They are the best. They know the passes. They know the wind. We will guard the road. We will make it safe. Your wagons will get through. Your town will grow." "And in return?" Cole asked, his eyes narrow. "Grain," Nantan said. "The trade I came for, fair trade. And the water, the spring at the Red River. You will sign a paper, your white man's law, that the water is Apache land, that no one can build on it, no one can own it but the people." It was a brilliant move, a truce, an agreement, not a surrender, a partnership. Sheriff Cole looked at Little Raven, who was staring at his cousin with a new, stunned respect. He looked at the townspeople, who were listening. He looked at old Ben, who nodded, just once. "A peace treaty," Cole said, his voice slow. "Here, in Dustwell, signed by the town council, and by the Apache elders." He let out a long breath. "I think I have been a fool for a very long time, for too long. I let a man like Harlow rule with fear. I am tired of fear." He put his hand out, not to Nantan, to Little Raven. "You tell your elders, we will talk, we will make this right." Little Raven looked at Nantan. Nantan nodded, slowly, his own hand still stained with the dust of the ridge. Little Raven took the sheriff's hand. He did not shake it. He just held it. A promise, an agreement, a new way. That night, Joanna Hayes walked out of the saloon for a breath of air. The town was quiet. Luke Harlow was in a cell, his empire of fear in ruins. Nantan was sleeping, a real sleep, his fever broken. She walked, and she found herself at the small, tilted graveyard by the church. She did not go to Elias's grave. There was no grave.
just a name on a rock. She stood by the fence, and she looked up at the stars. She thought of Elias. She thought of the young man she had married, the one who had been weak, but who had once been kind. She thought of his greed. She thought of her own loneliness, her own fear. They had both been trapped, he by his greed, she by her duty. "Goodbye, Elias," she whispered to the stars. "I forgive you for what you did and for what you were going to do. I hope you can forgive me for not being enough." She was not saying goodbye to him. She was saying goodbye to the woman she had been, the Apache's widow, the scared, silent, dutiful wife. A weight she had carried for years, a weight heavier than any sack of grain, lifted from her shoulders. She turned, and for the first time, she did not look back. She walked back to the saloon, back to the light, back to the man who was waiting, and to the future that was, finally, her own. The high desert sun, which had once been a hammer, now felt like a warm hand. 3 weeks had passed since the day the town of Dustwell had broken its own fever. The Hayes farm was no longer a place of fear. It was a place of work. The small cabin still leaned, but it leaned against a new, sturdy corral. The old, broken fence had been replaced by a post and rail fence, the wood straight and strong, and the well, which had always been bitter and shallow, was now deep and sweet. Nantan's people had shown them where to dig, using knowledge of the earth that Elias Hayes had never possessed. Sam was not a pale, coughing boy in the shadows. He was a small, brown-skinned whirlwind, running in the yard, his hair growing shaggy. He was never without the small, carved wooden hawk around his neck. He would shout to his mother in English, and then turn and yell "Shik Izni" to the pinto Nantan had left for them, a quiet guardian in the new corral. The town of Dustwell had changed, too. It was quieter, but it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of work. With Luke Harlow gone, his assets seized, his empire of debt and terror dismantled, the town had to learn to live on real trade, and it was wagons, which had once skirted the territory, now rolled down the main street. Old Ben Carter stood on his porch, a bucket of white paint in his hand. He was painting over the faded, chipped sign on his saloon wall, the one that said, "No Indians allowed." He grunted as he covered the last letter, his face unreadable. He did not replace it with a sign that said, "Welcome." He just left it blank. That was enough. The peace held. It was a strange, new, fragile thing. Little Raven, his anger cooled into a fierce, protective pride, now led patrols, but they were not war parties. His warriors, their face grim and proud, rode alongside the trade wagons, their presence a better guarantee than any cavalry escort. The attacks on the trade routes stopped, and, in return, the Apache did not have to steal. They did not have to beg. They traded. They came into town, not as savages, but as partners, to trade their pelts and their protection for the grain, the medicine, and the hard, sharp steel they needed. They were not friends, not yet, but they were neighbors. Sheriff Cole Maddox, his face lined with a weariness that was finally honest, sat at a rough table. Across from him sat the Apache elders and Little Raven. Nantan was not there. This was not his treaty, but the people's. Cole dipped a pen in ink. He signed his name to a piece of paper. It was not a grand treaty, but it was a promise. It recognized the Apache's right to the Red River Spring, forever. It forbade any white man from building on it, damming it, or claiming it. It was, for the first time in this land, a law that was not a lie. It was late afternoon. The sky was the color of a pale, blue stone. Nantan Greyhawk rode over the rise. He was not on a raid. He was not a fugitive. His shoulder was scarred, the muscles tight, but it was healed. He was riding, a man coming to visit his family. From the yard, a shout, "Nantan Giziza!"
Sam had seen him. The boy flew across the yard, his small legs pumping, and launched himself at Nantan as he dismounted. Nantan grunted, a real one. As the small body hit him, he caught the boy, swinging him up, his laugh a low, rough sound he was still learning to use. He settled Sam on his hip. The boy smelled of sun, dirt, and bread. Joanna stood on the porch. She was not the pale, terrified woman in a patched dress. Her hair was tied back, and there was flour on her cheek. Her arms were strong from hauling wood and water. She was wearing the same plain dress, but it did not look patched anymore. It just looked worn. She was not leaning on the door frame in fear. She was standing in the doorway of her own home. He walked to her, Sam still chattering in his ear, a mix of Apache and English. He stopped at the bottom step. She looked at him. Her eyes were different. The fear was gone. The ghosts were gone. There was just a deep, quiet, impossible warmth. "You are late," she said, her voice soft. "The council they talked to for a long time," he said. "They always do," she said, and a small smile touched her lips. "I kept supper warm." He nodded. He stepped up onto the porch, onto the wood he had helped her mend. He did not go inside. Not yet. They stood there, the three of them, in the golden fading light. "I am afraid sometimes," she whispered, her gaze on the far-off mountains, the place where his people lived. "I am afraid that this peace is just a dream. I am afraid the old world will come back. That hate is just sleeping." Nantan looked out, his gaze following hers. "The old world is always there," he said, his voice quiet. "The past is a heavy stone. You cannot destroy it. You cannot run from it." He looked down at her, at the flower on her face. "But you do not have to kneel to it. You just have to nod. You nod to show you remember, and then you turn, and you walk on." He reached out, his hand rough, and gently brushed the flower from her cheek. "We are walking on, Joanna." That night, the cabin was quiet. Sam was asleep in his small cot, one hand holding his carved hawk, the other curled in a small, satisfied fist. Joanna and Nantan stood on the porch, as they had that first night, but they were not separated by a fire, by worlds of hate and suspicion. They were just together. The stars were out, a cold, brilliant scatter of diamonds on black velvet. "Do you remember?" she whispered. "The Red River, I was so cold, so afraid." "I remember," he said. "You were not afraid. You were brave." "I was terrified," she said, looking up at him. "I was just more afraid of being alone." "You are not alone," he said. He moved, standing behind her, as he had at the river, but this was not a desperate, huddled warmth. This was a claim. His arms came around her, his hands clasping over her stomach, pulling her back against his chest. She was small against him, and she fit. She leaned her head back, resting it on his healed shoulder, her eyes closing as she breathed in the scent of him. He bent his head, his lips brushing the side of her neck, then her temple. "This is our home," he whispered. "Not Apache, not white, just ours." She turned in his arms, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. She looked into his eyes, the eyes that had seen so much death, and that had, in the end, chosen life. He kissed her. It was not the desperate, frantic, soul-tearing kiss of the riverbank. This was a kiss of promise. It was a kiss of coming home. It was slow and deep and quiet, and it held all the time in the world. It was a kiss that did not need to steal anything because it had already been given, freely, on a dusty street, and in a saloon, and in the heart of a small, sleeping boy. It was the kiss of a man and a woman who had, against all odds, found their place. A greyhawk, a giziza circled high above, the starlight glinting on its wings. It saw the small, quiet town of Dustwell. It saw the dark, peaceful ribbon of the Red River, flowing free, It saw the silent Apache village, high in the mountains, and it saw a small, leaning cabin, a light still burning in the window, a man and a woman standing on a porch, holding each other against the vast, dark, beautiful wilderness. He had ridden into Dustwell for a few sacks of grain. He left it with a widow, a child, and a future that no longer belonged to any one tribe or one color, but to those who dared to stand together on this wild land. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where in the world you are listening from. So please drop a comment below and let us all share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to my channel, Wild West Tales, and give this video a like. And to help this story be heard by more people, please consider supporting us by hitting that hype button. It means the world to us.